So welcome everyone. A really warm welcome to all of you. I'm Fiona, and together with Bien, we kickstarted One with Nature. It's a brand new online community with the intention of helping people remember our connection with nature. So before we begin, I would like to invite everyone to take one collective breath together and just bring to attention this present moment. So I invite you to find a comfortable seated position to settle into. And then just notice your sitting bones in contact with your seat. Feeling your feet contacting the floor beneath you. And you may choose to close your eyes or leave them open as we do this. Now together, let's inhale and exhale completely. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate you for joining us today. We have a very interesting interview for you today, and I'm going to introduce my dear friend Bien, who I'm sure a lot of people will in this group know. As much as he doesn't accept his title, Bien is really one of Southeast Asia's top botanists, most knowledgeable, and really one of the most humble people I know. I think some of you agree and nodding away with me. He spent nearly 20 years in the US and was curating living collections at the San Francisco Botanical Garden. This man pioneered the development of the Southeast Asian Cloud Forest Collection through collaborations and expeditions with Southeast Asian institutions. He has also worked for the world's largest network for plant conservation. How cool is that? The Botanic Gardens Conservation International, where he assisted botanical institutions across Southeast Asia in environmental education and saving rare plants. I would say that makes him a plant superhero. Today, he continues spreading his love for nature through leading nature and heritage tours. And he's really a dedicated teacher, sharing his knowledge, passion, and excitement with teachers and new biology teachers would be teaching all the kids in Singapore. NPark staff, nature guides, and industry professionals in plant identification and many other nature-related topics. He's someone who can just rattle off Latin names. I'll go, Bien, what's this tree? And he'll rattle off some Latin name. He knows the local name, he can speak Bahasa, so I'm constantly amazed. So welcome, Bien, and thank you for doing this with all of us.
Thanks for your kind words, Fiona.
And now to introduce our special guest, Claire Elouard, Dr. Claire Elouard. Can you pronounce your name again, Claire?
Claire Elouard.
My French is, yeah, there's just sounds of the name. Well, she spent her childhood in Senegal in Africa. She loved climbing trees and spending time in them, even more than being with people. I think some of us can relate to that. At a young age of 11, she had already decided that she was going to be a biologist. So she pursued biology and ecology in universities of France, and then a PhD in ecology that landed her in the forests of Indonesia. She then spent 8 years conducting research in forest pathology and ecology in Malaysia and South India, and more than half her life has been spent living in tropical countries. In Maharashtra, India, Claire led an environmental and humanitarian project with tribal farmers living in poverty, supporting them to diversify their agriculture and get a better livelihood, and teaching environmental and biology to farmers' children and teenagers, and building up small structures to collect rainwater and recharge the underground water. That's really interesting. And so today, using her gifts, Claire has stepped into the work of helping people connect with nature. And she has guided hundreds of people through her sought-after Energy of Nature workshops in France, China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Malaysia, and Singapore. And the way she combines science with personal development is incredibly unique. So, well, personally, I have attended her workshops and Bien as well. And without giving too much away, let's just say that now I've experienced the world in a very different way. So welcome, Claire and Bien.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona.
So today's topic is secret teachings of trees. So I hope that's kind of enough to pique everyone's curiosity about secret teachings of trees, and also opening our eyes to nature and how much we need nature, even if we don't realize it. So most of us just look at plants and they're just green things, and maybe we know that they have roots and stems and leaves. But there's a lot of research now that is pointing the way to making us more aware that plants are actually a lot more than just green things. Claire, would you like to share some of this research?
Yeah, I found the world of plants fascinating. I mean, they have some common functions with the animals, of course, like respiration, like the synthesis of protein, like the division of cells. But they also have their own functions, for example, photosynthesis. I mean, that's so brilliant. I find photosynthesis fascinating. Imagine going under the sun, just drinking some water, inhaling some carbon dioxide, and that's it. The meal is done. We could set up sunbathing cafes. But also there's another thing that is very special to plants, is that they don't have a brain and they don't have any centralized system. Instead, they have what we call electrical impulses or action potentials that are running all over the plants, in all the organs of the plants, and that serve as this equivalent of the nervous system. So in that, these electrical impulses trigger actions, trigger functions in the plants, so that they can live, they can produce new buds, new leaves, they can move, etc. So we can compare those electrical impulses to the nervous system, in the sense that the nerves are conducting also electrical impulses to the muscles for movement, etc. But no brain. Yes.
Wow, that's really amazing. The electrical impulses, I'm wondering if that's how plants know to grow towards the light. And you know, they actually respond to the environment. I remember in horticulture school, we were growing chrysanthemums, and we found out, or I learned that, I was so ignorant at the time, but as the days become shorter and the nights become longer, chrysanthemums and other plants like dahlias, they respond to that by initiating flower buds. And so they flower during the autumn time, when the days are getting shorter and the nights longer. But this is just responding to external stimuli. But currently we hear a lot of research into the intelligence of plants. So that's kind of like a new field.
Yes. Absolutely. There are many experiments done presently with the behaviors and the intelligence of plants. And that's amazing. It's a whole world. We could talk about it for 5 hours. I mean, for me, it's really amazing. But there's one thing that also we have in common with the plants, or they do have in common with us, is that they have the same five senses, but they have it in their own way. For example, the sense of vision. I mean, they perceive light and they perceive the nuances of light. But we also have found recently that some plants have ocelli, photoreceptors, like we find in jellyfish or in insects. Insects have some simple eyes that are ocelli also. They capture the light. And recently, one botanist has described a vine, Boquilla trifoliata, in South America, that mimics the shape of the leaves of the host. So this vine likes to climb on shrubs, but it wants to be inconspicuous. It doesn't want to be spotted by herbivorous animals to be eaten. So then it mimics the shape of the leaves. So at first, the botanists thought, okay, it is just, it's just a coevolution, meaning that they learn with evolution to have the same leaves. But they found that this vine can be in different hosts and change its leaves to mimic, to be equivalent, I mean, to look like the shrub. So they started to wonder, how come this vine knows, the shape of the leaves of the host? What's behind it? And they found that this climber has ocelli, these photoreceptors that can see the shape of the leaves of the host and then take it, produce the equivalent. So that means that if the host has oval leaves, the vine will have oval leaves. If the host has dented leaves, the leaves of the vine will be dented. And that's amazing. I mean, that's a discovery that is mind-blowing, because that means that plants see us. They look at us. You have a plant in your living room? Well, it sees you. Yes. So there are the other senses, like the sense of smell. Plants produce pheromones. They are volatile substances. Like, for example, the perfume of a flower, it's a pheromone to attract insects or other animals to pollinate the flower. But what we have so far discovered is that over 1,700 pheromones are produced by plants. And that's an enormous number. I mean, that's all the scents, that's all the odors that we can smell. I mean, from very, very fragrant ones to nasty one, like Rafflesia, who is producing a very nasty odor to attract flies. Yes. So pheromones are sent, in the air to convey different signals. One is the attraction of pollinators. Another one is repellence of pests. Don't come here, I don't want you. And another type of pheromones are warning messages to other plants that they are attacked. So it says basically, I'm attacked by pests. Don't start producing chemical defenses so that you will be ready when they come to you. And there is another type of pheromones that I find quite amazing, is that they attract predators of their predators. So for example, let's see, an oak tree is eaten by caterpillars. There are lots of caterpillars eating the leaves. So this oak tree will send pheromones that birds will get. And those birds, of course, love caterpillars. So they will get the message, hey, I've got plenty of caterpillars, come. And then the teats, basically, or the other birds, come to the oak tree to eat the caterpillars. And of course, it's very welcome, because teats and the other birds are feeding their chicks with the caterpillars. And so they enjoy it. So that's a very, very complex way of smelling and communicating. And we have seen the sense of vision, we have seen the sense of smell. The sense of taste is connected to the sense of smell, but for plants, it's in the roots. They can taste all chemical components and that are in the soil, water, the nitrogen, phosphorus, etc. Everything, all the types of nutrients that are in the soil, they can detect it, and if they need it, they go to it. So they know how to taste it. One more, the sense of hearing, that's also fascinating. They distinguish sounds. They hear vibrations. They like some types of music, like classical music, like jazz, etc. They feel comfortable, but they don't feel comfortable when there are some heavy vibrations, like metal music, etc. But also what has been discovered is that they can distinguish the different types of sounds. When a caterpillar, for example, is eating the plant knows it. So they have done an experiment putting plants in two different rooms. In one room, there will be silence. And in another room, they will put speakers that are diffusing the sound of caterpillars munching. Then the plants hear it and they start producing chemical defenses against the caterpillars, the predators. Yeah. Then what they do after that, they put real caterpillars in the rooms. So in the room with the plants who have heard the sound of caterpillars, the plants are defending themselves because they have started producing chemical defenses. And in the silent room, no sound, the plants are completely eaten by caterpillars. They are defenseless. Well, after some time, they start producing chemical defenses, but at first, they are defenseless. So that was something. But the researchers wondered, okay, maybe that's any sound that is provoking, the production of chemical defenses. But that's not any sound, because they did the same experiments with sound of wind and another sound of insects, that is the mating calls of some insects. And the plants did not react in the same way. They knew that the wind and the mating calls were not a threat. So they didn't produce any chemical defenses. So they know, they can distinguish what is a threat and what is not in the sound. Yeah. So that's interesting. Now let's come to the sense of touch. Okay, you all know Mimosa pudica. Mimosa pudica, that when you touch it, it's closing the leaves, and that's a sense of touch. There we have the Venus flytrap also, that when an insect goes in, it triggers the closing of the Venus flytrap. I mean, plants have the sense, they know what they touch. They know, they understand that what is touching them. Yeah. So we also can say, that plants have these 5 senses in their own way, but there are also many, many more senses. Some up to 20 different senses have been identified. And among them, gravity, the sense of humidity, etc. But what's interesting is that it is Stefano Mancuso, one of the lead researchers in this area, says that because plants don't move, they had to develop a high sensitivity to everything happening in their environment. And it made them develop also a lot of strategies. They can't escape the threat, so they fight or they defend themselves in another way. Yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating that they're finding out new senses of plants. Yeah, it's a never-ending discovery, which is just so amazing. And when you say that they're evolving and they're all these senses, I'm just reminded of Darwin's theory of evolution, and we always think of this phrase, which I think Darwin actually never said: survival of the fittest. And it's kind of like a dog eat dog world where yes, there is competition, but then I think in my studies with plants, I've come to realize that actually it's not always competition, and that we are finding newer and newer new discoveries that are saying that plants actually, there are a lot more collaborative and symbiotic relationships. For example,
yes, also they have memory. They have the sense of memory. They are intelligent in their own way. Yes. So the memory, memory makes also that, okay, they remember things, and that's something that I found also fascinating, because they can remember things, and they can remember things for longer than some animals.
Without a brain.
Without a brain, yeah, we don't know where it happens. I mean, it's somewhere in the plant that they store memory. I mean, Stefano Mancuso and his team. Stefano Mancuso is an Italian researcher, and he's doing a lot of research on behavior and intelligence of plants. And he found that there are some molecules of memory that are attached to the DNA of the plants. So he did an experiment to demonstrate that they have memory, and that's that's an amazing one. It's they took Mimosa pudica. Mimosa pudica is an easy plant to look at because it's closing its leaf in a very conspicuous way. So he took some Mimosa pudica, and of course, Mimosa pudica. I mean, he took the Mimosa pudica plants and he devised a mechanism that would shake the plant. So it would bring the plant from up and abruptly down. And of course, the Mimosa pudica would get shaken and would fold the leaves. Oh, it's a threat, it's a threat, I'm being threatened. So he did that several times. And after some time, the plant did not close its leaves anymore. Why? Because it understood that it was not a pleasant movement, but it was not a threat. And why spend energy in closing my leaves if I'm not threatened? You know, that's so they made another experiment in shaking the plant horizontally. And same way, same thing, the plant closed its leaf for a while and after that left it open. I understand it's not a threat. Then they left the leaves, the plants, the Mimosa pudica plants, alone for 10 days. And they again shook the plants from up to down. And what happened? The plant did not close its leaves. I remember you did that and it was not a threat. Yes. And I mean, some animals don't remember things for 10 days and plants do. Plants do. So they have the sense of memory. Yes.
Wow, that's incredible. That, yeah, it's, yeah, even without a brain, I find that just so amazing. I remember during my undergraduate days, well, what really got me into plants was also the bonsai, the dwarf trees in Japan. And I remember reading books that said, if you want to know if your pine tree or your oak tree is really healthy, you take the plant out of the pot and you look at the roots. And if it's covered by this white mold, and I was thinking, mold, are you sure mold is a fungus? It's not really healthy, is it? And it said, if there's a big coating of mold, your tree will be very happy. And I actually saw this in plants, and it's true. The buds were just totally strong and healthy, and it was just growing so well. And I was thinking, oh, okay, so this is just one individual tree having a very good relationship with a fungus. So there's actually a lot of symbiosis and collaboration in the natural world. So it's not actually survival of the fittest. Well, it is on one hand, but there's a lot of other good things to balance it with. And when now that I'm looking at natural systems and in the forest, and you think of each tree in the forest having a fungal relationship, and then now there is new research, quite recent research, and I'm sure many people here today may have heard of this also, that the fungus connects the trees in the forest. So Claire,
yes.
Yeah, can you clarify that for us?
Yes, that's
happening.
That's interesting. I participated in a project in Malaysia, and in this project, some of us were cutting the seedlings of Meranti, of Dipterocarps, to get them stronger before replanting them in the forest. So now we know how to inoculate those fungi. What's interesting in those fungi is that they are in some symbiosis with the trees, and so there's a mutual benefit in it. The trees are giving shelter to the fungus, and also it's giving some sugars to feed it. Stay with me, I'm feeding you. In exchange, the fungus is helping the tree into getting a better access to phosphorus, to nitrogen, so nutrients, and also to water. The coating in the roots is very spongy, so it can absorb water in an easier way. So both are getting a benefit. So that's what was known, I mean, for a long time. But recently, some more things have been discovered about this, this symbiosis. And it goes very, very far. I mean, it's connecting the two communication between trees. So the trees have this mycelium coating. Yeah, the mycelium are the roots, the equivalent of the roots for the fungi, and this mycelium coating around it. But it's also, this mycelium is extending to the next trees, like a network. So it's making a network. They have their own internet. And what's amazing is that in this network, the trees can communicate, can send messages like the one I was talking about. Hey, I'm eaten by pests, start producing chemical defenses because maybe you will get them. But also they can send components. They can send water, carbon dioxide, sugars, and and nutrients through this network. So they can help each other. And what's fascinating is that they mostly help each other during challenges. Like, for example, when there's a drought, the big trees, of course, they have a bigger storing capacity, and they store sugars and water in their trunk. So when there's a drought, the small trees, well, have a smaller capacity. So very, very fast, they get short of water. So they send a message, help me, through this network, through this fungal network. And then the big trees can help them, can send some water, to help them to sustain the drought. Of course, if it is a very long drought at the end, I mean, everyone is short of water, but it helps to fight against the drought at least during some time. There's another thing that has been noticed is that when there's a very cold winter, the deciduous trees cannot make photosynthesis. They have lost their leaves. So they have to sustain themselves on their sugars, on their storage of sugar. And of course, it takes a lot of energy to fight against cold. So in a very harsh winter, the big trees can send sugar through this network to the other trees. And this has all been discovered first by Susan Simard, a Canadian ecologist. And she also demonstrated that at first they thought that it was only a help in the same species. I'm helping my family members, but actually it's not. They help, each other. Species, it's not species wife. An oak can help a beech tree, etc. So they help each other, whatever the species it is. Yeah, there's interconnection between species at this level as well. That's fascinating. Yeah.
So that's not, they don't only help their own kind. They help other people, the other different species.
Yeah, and what we know also is that the trees, the big trees, the mother trees, they know which young trees are their offspring or not. They know, they can distinguish between them. You're my baby.
Oh.
Yes, that's interesting. But let's not be all goody-goody, and nature is not all goody-goody. You have competitions. I mean, we can, it's obvious that plants and trees are fighting for space, for light, for water, and for nutrients. So in normal times, I would say, well, they fight for it. But when there's a challenge, because they look for the survival of the ecosystem of the forest on its whole, they help each other. Of course, when a tree is growing, it needs its neighbor to stay alive for different reasons. One is that if the neighboring tree is dying, it will make a hole in the forest. So there's more light and the conditions will change. It won't like it. It will be too hot for the tree. The second one is that if there is a diversity of species in the forest, then they can fight against pest and disease. Because if, for example, a fungus likes an oak tree, then if the oak tree has a beech tree behind it, then the fungus will be stopped. The problem in the plantation is that you have all the same trees. So the fungus is spreading from one tree to another at a very, very fast rate. But in a diverse forest, the damages are contained because there's diversity, and that, or not all the species are interesting the fungus. The same for pests.
So Claire, that fungus that you're talking about that's spreading is a pathogenic
the
fungus.
pathogenic
fungus.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sorry, pathogenic. I'm talking about pathogens, pests and disease. Yes. There's another thing that is very important in a forest concerning this diversity in species and in ages, is that you have the larger diversity you have in the species, the larger diversity in animals you will have. And animals are useful for plants. They pollinate, and they pollinate the flowers, and they disseminate the seeds. So welcome, welcome. And my friend Beach will welcome some different animals than me. And I am happy that he's here. Yeah, so the higher the diversity, the better the forest is. So trees and plants are helping each other to look for the well-being, for their well-being and the well-being of the whole ecosystem.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I think well-being is a key word. And I want to bring it back to the times that we're living in now with the pandemic and COVID-19. And during our period last year when we were not allowed to go out, I felt really deprived that I couldn't go out and connect with nature. And I think many of us all over the world feel consciously or subconsciously very uncomfortable when we are not allowed to go out. And you can see now that people have discovered all the secret places in Singapore. They're just really needing to be out in nature and to de-stress. And I'm thinking that there must be some lesson here that the trees can give us during this very stressful period. And Claire, can you tell us what your thoughts are on how trees can help us?
Well, we can learn many, many things from trees. I mean, they have a lot of qualities and that can inspire us. But I believe in these times, they can teach us mostly adaptation and resilience. They have a high capacity to adapt to their environment, and this is coming from the fact that they can't move, so they have to find ways to survive. And resilience as well. They have a high level of resilience. I mean, the last typhoon in Hong Kong was very, very strong, and I went there after it happened, and it was amazing that nature was already, sprouting and starting again. I mean, okay, how they get the shock and then they recover and they start again. And that's something we can learn. I mean, when I was working in India, there were some very bad times or very difficult times, and I had to, okay, that's what is happening, but let's start again. Coming back to my initial commitment, and yes, starting again. Yeah. So that's something we can learn. Another thing that we can learn from trees is the acceptance of death. Death is part of life. And in nature, we have cyclic systems like birth, creation, maintenance, and existence, and death or destruction. That gives way to birth again, etc. So these are cycles. And when we remove death from this cycle, it becomes a linear system. And linear systems are not part of nature. They are not viable.
Wow, wow. Yeah, it's been really hard this time for all of us, but connecting with trees just, yeah, there's something so special about that, and learning these lessons from the trees, I think is a huge lesson all of us can learn. Yeah,
Yeah,
thanks a lot, Claire.
yeah. The connection with nature is beneficial for us and extremely important for the body, for the mind, and for the spirit. And that's important. The connection with the soil is important. We forget it. And there's a real well-being in touching soil, in planting things, in gardening. I mean, the other day I was in the garden and in my garden, and I was planting things, and at one point, you know, I just stood up and just, I'm happy. And then what came is, I'm happy to be happy. I mean, there was this well, you know, this welling of happiness coming with being in contact with nature, planting things, you know, that was really amazing for me. And some Finland researchers have demonstrated that when children are in contact with soil for just a month, you know, getting into planting things, their immune system is better and the digestive system is better as well. So it's improving a lot our body. And if our body is fine, the mind is fine, and the spirit is fine. Yes. And there's another research that has been done by Bristol, researchers from Bristol in England, and they have found that in the soil, there's a bacteria, Agrobacterium vaccae, that is improving the immune system. So they tried it on mice, and the mice not only had the immune system improved, but also the level of stress was decreased. And why? Because this bacteria is boosting the production of serotonin and dopamine, the happiness hormones, as we call them. So that's something that we know now, that it's very important to be in contact with the soil, and we have lost it in the cities.
Wow, wow, that's fantastic. So everyone, go get your hands dirty and do some gardening. Great,
Yes,
great. Thank you
yes.
so much.
And when nature is affected, we are affected. Let's not forget it. You know, that's nature is fighting. Nature is fighting for its survival, of course. Yeah, it will fight and fight and fight and fight. So, for example, it will produce some stronger things like pollen. You know, there was a study that was done in a place where there was a industrial complex. So there was a lot of pollution in that place, and people were suffering from allergy from the pollens. And why? Because the trees were producing pollens that were very strong to fight against the dust of the pollution. So the coating was very strong. The coating of the pollen grains was very strong. And then they moved this industrial complex to another place. This happened in China and in other places. And what happened? There was less allergy for the people. And this was connected to the fact that the pollens produced were not so strong anymore because they didn't need to fight against pollution anymore. So the coating was, you know, uh, thinner. So we know now that nature is going to fight back in different ways,
Wow, so we are really closely tied to nature. Yeah,
Yeah,
what we put out in the atmosphere and pollution and into the environment, that really affects us in a direct way. And yeah, I think all of us know this already. It's just that we need to do something about it and be more
yes.
conscious of it.
And we can talk about the body, the connection of to nature with the body, but the mind also is affected when we are disconnected from the body,
Yeah,
from nature.
psychologically.
I mean, uh, yes, that's when we are losing our connection with nature, we lose our connection with ourselves.
Yes, yes.
Mm.
We are so closely tied to nature.
We are part of nature.
Yeah.
So yes, and we've come to, we're going to leave some time for Q&A for everyone to share with us questions that you might have. So if you could just type in the chat box any questions that you might have. We're going to save some time for Q&A. But as you're submitting your questions, I have some questions for Bien and Claire. So Claire, when people speak of nature, it's as if nature is separate from us. Example, I want to go to nature, or I need to connect with nature. And it's as if nature is separate from us. But humans are also part of nature. So my question is, how did we disconnect from nature? How did that happen?
Well, because we were not anymore growing things. I mean, we can start with that. Food is basic. And when we don't see things growing, you know, producing tomatoes or zucchinis or whatever, I mean, we don't know anymore about that, about nature. And I mean, I remember when I was living in India, the tomatoes were produced in winter. That's the tomatoes are growing during the winter time. So when I came back to France, it was in the month of May, and I love tomatoes. So I went to a farm nearby in which we can harvest our produce. And I asked the farmer, "Come on, you don't have tomatoes." And he looked at me very sternly and said, "That is not the season." Yeah. So I learned that, yes, I mean, I was buying tomatoes in the supermarket. I didn't know that they were not produced they were only produced in summertime, you know, in France. So we are disconnected with the season. We are disconnected with how to grow. It's so difficult. I can't get any zucchini in my garden. They are all eaten by slugs. You know, how do they do? I mean, I'm talking about organic farming, of course. But how do they succeed to have those beautiful, you know, zucchinis? I can't. So it's difficult. We don't know anymore. We just buy things in the supermarket all year long. We have them, and well, how is it produced? I don't know. Yeah. Then we have all this concrete. We don't connect with trees around, with plants around, etc. And that's how we got started to get disconnected from it. Yeah.
Fiona, you spent some time also in going on from what Claire has said, this disconnect with nature. You actually had spent some time connecting with nature. You spent some months. Where was this?
Yeah, I spent some time living in a forest in Wales, some months there. And yes, it's true that I mean, I live in the city and going to Wales for the first time, living in a forest, complete city bumpkin. And for the first time, I interacted with fire on that level, having to collect my firewood, cook on the fire, and having a relationship with water. So going to the spring and collecting water, and how I'm part of nature. I collected nettle, foraged wild garlic, and there are so many amazing plants around me living in the forest with me. And I could see my direct impact on the soil. So if I peed on that same area for too many times, I can see my immediate impact to the soil, and I see it getting black. So it was such an amazing experience, because I feel that in Singapore, you know, just turning on the stove, cooking something, and turning, you know, using water and showering without giving thanks. And I think this is how I forgot about nature, and that I'm part of nature. So I'd love to carry on, but I want to also go through some of these questions that some of you have shared here. And one, I think a couple of people are asking about recommendations on where they can find more literature or material about the forest's importance to people. So this is Bundan who's asked this question. So Claire,
Yeah.
do you have any interesting books or research papers to share?
Well, for me, I mean, the books of Stefano Mancuso are fascinating. I mean, he talks about intelligence of plants. Connected to the forest, there are some books, maybe we can put them on the websites, some recommendations of books. Nothing comes to me very precisely now, but I know I have a list of books that can be suggested.
Mm.
Yeah.
And then there's another question from Janie for Claire. Could you give us a basic idea of how plants develop their memory smell without a brain or nose? Is there any material?
That's the mystery. No, they just are. I mean, how did a human being develop a brain like that? You know, it's part of evolution. It's trial and error. Bian was talking about the survival of the fittest. They started to develop something. It works. Then we continue to develop it. That's part of evolution. Yeah, but we don't know exactly. We know how it works. We start to know how it works, but there are still many things that are to be investigated that are question marks. Yeah.
Thank you. And
there's a large gap now between those people who think, okay, they have plants are intelligent in their own way, and other people that are just thinking that, oh, a tree is like a electric pole, trees are objects, plants are objects. Yeah.
And that leads on to the next question, and maybe Bian, you could chime in too. What are the simple ways to connect with nature, especially living in an urban society? Oh, this is a tough one.
Ways, yeah. I can give an example. During last year's restrictions where we were not allowed to go out, I'm part of the Nature Society, and if you visited the Nature Society Facebook page, the number of postings from bird sightings from people's windows and balconies shot up many times the normal. And people were just finding ways to connect to nature, and just observing nature from their windows was one way. Yeah, just looking at the birds that come and go, because people were just stuck at home, and the only way to connect is just through your window and just looking out. And I think that's a nice way. And also being able to take walks out, and sometimes with just no goal in mind, but just to walk. We are always so goal driven, and this leads back to the disconnect with nature, where we are in such an urban society where everything has to be goal driven. What am I going to achieve by 5 p.m. today? If I go out, I've got to go and get A, B, C, D. Sometimes it's nice just to go out and be aimless for a while and let nature lead you, or let your own mind and your intuition and whatever happens, and just enjoy it. I think
just be in the present. Just
yes.
Be in the present.
Yes, that's right, Claire. Thank you.
Yeah, in France too. I mean, because of this sanitary crisis, the people buying plants have shot up, but some of them don't know how to take care of them. But there's a lot of teaching that is going on. Even this morning, I watched the news, and they were sharing, they were interviewing one person that was telling how to take care of the plants inside the home. And so yes, there's some learning. People are more eager to get connected to plants. Yeah.
And Satyajit asked a follow-up question. And do you know if there's any way in your experience to understand plants better, communicate with them, understand what they're feeling, and if they have any messages for us? And I maybe you could also share about, because both of your scientific backgrounds are so strong. You're from such a science mind, and how do you link science and spirituality? Because there is a link there, because if we're talking about communicating with plants, and if they have any messages for us. So Would you like to comment on that, Claire?
Communicating with plants, we can start very in a simple way, you know, to look around, to look at plants with love, I mean, with our heart. And another way is we can talk to them, you know, they are perceiving vibrations. Of course, they won't understand the words, but they understand where, if, you know, if the intention when we speak is I love you, or if the intention is I'm going to cut you, you know, they feel the differences. This has been demonstrated. So they just starting, you know, to be loving, to be looking at plants with love, with admiration, and talking to them. I mean, my mother, when she would water her plants in the morning, she would talk to them. Oh, you have produced new leaves. It's so beautiful. I mean, whatever. But that's showing our sense of wonder. That's showing our connection with them. That's showing our love for them. That's a start. After we can, you know, look for qualities in nature that can, you know, help us or that we can connect with, but that's another story.
Yeah, I can give an example. I used to grow a lot of plants in my garden in San Francisco, and I would just spend lots of time just out there until it was so late already that it was dark, and I would just be lost with my plants, and they would grow really well. And then here in Singapore, I don't spend a lot of time with them, and they don't grow well at all. And so it's just the connection, as Claire mentioned, with the heart and your appreciation for plants. And once there is a connection, they grow really, they can grow really well. Okay, this next example very quickly. My friend Shindy, she had on her balcony 5 plants, and just, you know, ordinary, an orchid, basil, or Dieffenbachia, and they were just so beautiful. There was not one spot on the leaves, and if she had entered them into a competition, she would have won first prize straight away. They were so beautiful. And I asked her, Shindy, what's your secret? And she said, I talk to my plants. And boy, it really, I'm a firm believer in that. So it's the connection with your thoughts and your appreciation, and it's the love. Basically, it's love, as Claire said, this connection with the heart, which I think is so important. And not just to treat the plants or the trees just as commodities, as something that you can just go under for shade or just pluck the flowers because they're pretty, but that they are actual real living things that you can connect to on a very personal level.
And it's not a one-way, the census, it has been demonstrated. I mean, Baxter, a researcher in the 60s in US, hooked some electrodes to plants, and he was a lie detector specialist. So he hooked a lie detector system to the plants. And so he would record the oscillations, the electrical impulses. But I will make it short, but at one time he devised an experiment in which he would leave the room for a certain amount of time, and it would always vary. It could be 3 minutes, could be half an hour, could be 1 hour, etc. It was never the same time. And he noticed that every time he would come back to the room with the plants, they would have a peak of oscillation. So they would know he was in the room. I mean, they would show that they knew he was coming into the room. Yeah.
Wow, plants are conscious, definitely.
Yeah.
So is tree hugging good for us, and is hugging the tree good for them? I think that's a really good question from Phil and Anissa. And someone, Kushi, also said that he's named named his plants. Yeah.
Yeah.
So is hugging the tree actually good for them, and can trees feel us?
Well, they sense us. They sense us, yes. As we said, I mean, they know we are there. They know we are with them. They know we are in the room with them. So yes, they love getting attention. I mean, they thrive. They thrive when they have attention. I mean, as Bian was telling about his friend, yes.
So when you prune plants, Nahid is asking, should you inform them and state your attention, and do they feel pain?
Yeah. So there are 2 different things. yes, we can say, okay, tomorrow I'm going to trim you. So that the plant has the time to remove, to remove most of its consciousness from the parts that are going to be trimmed. It's the same with the tree that is going to be cut. And trimming can be beneficial. For example, for a fruit tree that is going heavy with the fruits. I mean, the branches will break, so it can be beneficial at a time, and it can trimming can also lessen the number of branches that are getting energy. So if we trim, the remaining branches will get more energy. It's the same with sprouts. It's good to remove sprouts because the sprouts are taking energy from the plant, from the tree, and that's useless. So it's good to trim to remove the sprouts.
Mm.
I have seen avocado trees in India that were, just lagging. I mean, falling down. The branches were touching the ground because they were too heavy. So we trimmed them, and I mean, it was very beautiful. There was harmony coming from them after the trimming. But of course, it shouldn't be excessive. It should be well done, and it's good to tell them beforehand. Coming to the pain, we know they feel something. Pain is, we have our own definition of pain as animals and human beings. Maybe they don't have the same sensation of pain, but they do feel, they react. When we cut a leaf, when we cut a branch, etc., they react. It shows that the electrical impulses are changing.
What about plants and vegetables grown in totally artificial environments? So are they happy, like an indoor plant factory?
Indoor plants. Well, if they have good soil and good watering and good sun, that's fine.
In a totally artificial environment, like an indoor plant factory with
yeah. Well, what I found amazing is that when Stefano Mancuso is mentioning, those plants that are studied, like the orchids that are put in gel, all the plants that are put in gel in laboratory. And he said that very often people who do that, they say, oh, they are growing lots of roots and they're expanding well, so they are fine. But actually, Stefano Mancuso was saying roots don't like light. So they grow roots to try to escape, this light. And of course, they can never escape because it's only gel. And the gel is translucent, so they get a lot of light. So they grow roots to try to go deeper and deeper and deeper. Maybe at one point I will find some soil that will shade me from the light. But actually, they are not happy. They are not happy because they are trying to escape light. Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, I mentioned the roots.
I really love the messages that are coming through, and there are people saying that they can play music and what kind of music, and there's some suggestions here. And Tumai here named her plant Orlando because he blooms. Yeah, and there's so many types of music. I'm sure that some ask specifically, is it Bach or what kind of artist do they like? Yes, and we've come to the end of our session. Unfortunately, we've only have an hour, and but we will continue, and we are going to plan another session. So Claire has very graciously given us more time for a second session to be on the 3rd of July, and that will be on making friends with trees. So Claire will talk a little bit more about really how do you start to connect with them
and with nature.
Yes. And that's going to be really exciting, and we would love if you could share this information with your friends. You can go on to onewithnature.sg, and we also have a Facebook page. If you go to we'll share this in on our page as well. So I would like to thank Claire and Bien.
Thank you.
And everyone here. We didn't get a chance to go through all the questions, but we hope to do so in our next session. And I'd like to read Zarin's last quote here, just closing off, by Hal Borland. Knowing trees, I understand the meaning of patience. Knowing grass, I can appreciate persistence. That's beautiful.
Yes, yes, lovely. Thanks so much, Fiona.
Thank you.
Thanks for hosting us.
Thank you. And please remember to join our community online. So just type in your email address and we will send you upcoming events, and hopefully we'll have more exciting information and experiences to share with all of you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.